Hello everybody and welcome to DidgieTalks. Today we're doing a video on Tesla's software release 2019.20.1. I am aware that 2019.20.2.5 is already out there in the wild, and as soon as I get that I'll do a video on it. In the release notes for 20.1 it only talks about improvements to dog mode, so we won't really cover that. Instead I'm going to take a look at autopilot and navigate on autopilot, specifically autopilot failing on a sharp turn, some village driving, what it does when there's no road markings, and then navigate on autopilot, auto exit from motorways and A roads, and we'll be looking at some junctions too. I hope you like the video. If you do, don't forget to click the like button. Also don't forget to subscribe. The more subscriptions you get, the more videos we'll be doing. So strap in, enjoy the ride, and thanks for watching. So here we go, and we're going to see an example of where autopilot isn't quite ready yet for the road ahead. The car in front slowed right down. You can see the road turns sharp to the left and it wants to go straight on. So there you go, I had to take over. And I've switched autopilot off now. We're just about to go through a village on full autopilot with probably no intervention whatsoever. This gives you a great example of where autopilot is still leaps and bounds a bit ahead of everybody else. There's a few interesting situations on this road. There's a curb that juts out right there that we've just gone past. Bus lanes, curbs, and no road markings on the left, just curb and curbstone. But the car has no problem, it sees those and it uses those as its markers. We're coming up to a relatively sharp left-hand turn, but again, because we're at safe speeds, slow speeds, I doubt that the EU regulations for auto steer turn is going to even kick in. Let's have a look. Nope, handled beautifully, absolutely sublime. Now there's an interesting situation again up ahead. We've got a new road surface with no road markings at all. So we've got two lanes, no central divide road markings, but let's see how the car handles actually having nothing to tell it where the middle of the road is. Now I'm not sure what it's doing exactly, but it's still seeing a middle of the road. Now it's obviously using the left-hand side of the road as a marking. There is a different colour where the tarmac joins in the middle of the road, and it may well be using that as a central marking, as a reference. But look at that, no road markings whatsoever. Car's handling it fantastically. So we're coming up to another village, so another example of how autopilot handles not town roads by any means, but definitely roads which require a little bit more intelligence, a little bit more response. So slowed down to speed limit. Another speed camera, so always good to have that. Obviously matching the car in front, so not doing the 30-mile-an-hour limit at the moment. But this is another great example of how autopilot's come a really long way, and how it can actually handle some relatively tight situations with a few things going on. Got people, sides of the roads, it's not worried about that. We haven't had any false positive brakings. Still matching the car in front beautifully. Keeping us in the middle of the lane. Keeping some pressure on the wheel so we don't keep getting nagged. Hate that nag. Here we go, so there's a little bit of a twist and a turn coming up, but again, autopilot's going to handle this perfectly, smoothly, buttery smooth, as Elon would say. Far off of where we want it to be for autopilot, full autopilot. So far so good. But then it's just been simple roads. There's not been any obstacles, there've not been cars parked half on, half off the road. Any of those things that really cause autopilot to essentially fail in its current iteration. Car pulling out from the left, but again that's not going to be an issue. Traffic lights up ahead. Cars in front are going to slow us down and stop us. Cars parked left hand side, left and right. Here we go. again, beautifully handled all the way through the village, no issues. Could have almost just done it itself with no support. So let's get into lane. I'm going to put autopilot on, 70 mile an hour road, and as you can see, navigating autopilot has kicked in. So it's now saying to me that I can change lanes, but actually there's cars pulling up fast behind me, so I can't. It will go red now, I would hope. No. I'm not going to attempt to change the lane it's recommending because I've got a car right on my tail on the inside, as you can see coming through now. Now I'm going to kick it in, and it switched it off. So it was recommending it was suggesting a lane change, and now it's not. Now it's suggesting a lane change and the line's red because there are cars pulling up behind me or pulling past on the outside. It sees them now, just keeping that red lane in play, not letting me make the change, and now it's suggesting we carry on straight. So not sure what logic is going on there for it to suggest lane change when it's unsafe and then take it off. Right, it's suggesting a lane change, going to put it in. Here we go. Car behind's flashed its lights and let me in. There you go. There's an example of navigate on autopilot suggesting a lane change and doing the job for us and doing a good job of it. Mustn't grumble with that. And again, these situations where you've got good road markings and normal national speeds, autopilot is amazing, it's fantastic. You can relax a bit, you can let the car take the most of the strain, just be ready to take over, just be ready to do your thing. The car, again, is not full autonomy, so that's what us Tesla drivers know, that we're always to be vigilant and alert. But in these situations, this car is just amazing. Absolutely sublime, absolutely love it. We're moving in towards a 50 mile an hour section of this dual carriageway, and navigating autopilot has disengaged, so it can see the lanes. It's actually suggesting we've got 3 lanes now. No, now it's suggesting we've got 1 lane. And this is something I've noticed more and more of lately. There's 3 lanes again, when in fact there's only 2, as you can see. Now there's 1. And for some reason it just seems to be a bit flaky. It's seeing lanes that aren't there, it's not seeing the lanes that are there, which are clearly marked. I really don't know why it's not seeing those lanes. They're suggesting 3 lanes again. There is a off ramp here, so I can understand that it would see that there is a lane there. No, it's not seeing either the lane next to us or the off lane now. And I'm going to adjust the speed to 50. This is one of those examples where we've gone from 70 to 50, but the autopilot doesn't actually change down to a 50 mile an hour limit. It sees 50 mile an hour on the speed sign, but it doesn't change the autopilot speed down to 50. I'm not sure why it does that. We'll have to do that manually. Again, it handles these roads perfectly well, really safely. I would say as safe, if not safer, than me driving myself. Really does a good job. I think the navigating autopilot and the lane change kicks off or switches off because we're in a 50 mile an hour zone, dual carriageway. And that seems to be consistent with recent revisions of autopilot, that when you're in a 50 mile an hour zone on a dual carriageway, even with the central dividers we've got it now, it's less willing to give you that lane change. Well, it sees the next adjacent lane now, plenty of cars in it, but the lines have now disappeared. It's not safe for me to auto lane change into the entire inside lane, but actually I think when it sees the lane on the 50 mile an hour dual carriageways like this one, it will allow me to auto lane change. Navigating autopilot won't suggest anything, but let's have a look. Right, I'm not in a situation where it would be safe for me to change lanes. The car on my inside behind me is too close, and actually I'd say the car on the inside of the front is probably a bit too close. So no lane change opportunity here, but we're coming back up to a 70 mile an hour zone, so I'm going to tell autopilot that we're back into a 70 mile an hour section and it can take over those speeds. Here we go. Off we go. Don't you just love that acceleration? Perfectly smooth and linear. Oh, these cars are amazing. Right, so I'm going to tell it to change lanes, and lane. It's doing that perfectly well. Let's see if Navigate and Autopilot kicks back in, which I would expect it to do any minute now. Not yet. We're well into the 70 mile an hour zone. There we go. It knows we're back into the 70 mile an hour zone. It knows there's a lane next to us. It's not suggesting we overtake the cars in front for one reason or another. I'm not entirely sure why. It knows that we want to do 70. It knows that we're restricted to less because of the cars in front, but it's not currently recommending any lane change. And now it's actually turned me into the off ramp. For why, I'm not entirely sure. It didn't suggest anything. It didn't tell me it was necessarily going to do it, but actually it did that automatically. So there's an example of it knowing from navigation that we're going to go to the off ramp. It engaged the indicator. It changed the lane for us without any input from me whatsoever. Wow. Isn't that cool? Right, we're coming up to a more complex junction. Is it going to keep me? Yep, it's kept me in the lane I'm supposed to be in. So the car's handling everything. Again, I'm not doing anything now. Car's just stopped us because the car in front has stopped. And looking at the junction ahead, I expect Autopilot to take us through it and keep us on destination as per navigation. Let's see. Here we go. I'm going to press the throttle and get it moving so it doesn't delay. Here we go. Yep, so far so good. Sees the road, sees the junction, a little bit jerky, but there you go, look at that, we're on. Yep, keeping us in lane. Again, handling that junction with no intervention. Oh, I just took over slightly. It was getting a bit close to the curb there. I think it probably would have taken care of it for me, but I had a little bit too much pressure on the steering, so I think my nerves probably bottled out before the car did there. Back onto Autopilot. Back onto the car taking care of everything. It's again seeing 3 lanes on the right when there are only 2, which is odd. It's a bit worrying. Now it's only seeing 1 lane. Which lanes are going to go into? Yeah, it's kept us in the right lane to keep us going in line with navigation. So actually handling some of this journey really well, fantastically, in terms of following the navigation and dealing with some relatively complex road conditions. But again, that not seeing adjacent lanes or only seeing the lane you're in is a bit of an odd one for me. I'm going to take Autopilot off because we're heading into a roundabout. It seemed to be taking on that roundabout itself. Happy to do so, but too much going on around me. I wasn't going to risk the car doing something odd. So back in 50 mile an hour zone. Car speeding back up. It sees the adjacent lane, so it would allow an Autopilot lane change if I chose to. Let's try it to give it a lane change. Yep, there it goes. No problem at all. Took care of that beautifully. So we're in a 50 mile an hour zone. I'm going to pull back in order to maintain the speed limit. Again, pulled in perfectly, no problems at all. Right, this should handle this okay actually, because there are road markings in place whilst it's a roundabout and not... No, it didn't like that, so I took over. Again, I'm pretty sure it would have handled this bit okay. And this bit, because the road markings are all in place. There you go, Autopilot's available again. So let's get into this left lane and switch it back on. Let's see. Yeah, look at that. Indicated, changed lanes, no intervention from me at all. How cool is that? Sticking to the lane, sticking to the lorry. Navigating autopilot disengaged because going down single lanes. Still the car doing all the driving for me. How's it going to handle this? Autopilot. Okay. Right, now it wants me to take over. I'm glad it did that. It didn't pull me into the lane, but it certainly took care of everything leading up to that point really well. I love that indicating and pulling off the off-ramp on its own automatically. So it's actually indicating and changing lane automatically at that point with no input from me whatsoever. So that just shows you that it can change lanes automatically, why we're not allowed to do it, why it won't let them do it, or why they've switched it off for standard usage on straight roads is a bit of a mystery. I guess they've got their reasons. I guess it just wasn't quite ready, but nevertheless, how cool is that? So just heading to a supercharger now for that free charging. Give the brain a rest, pause all the cameras, and prepare for the return trip. Like I said, on that particular trip, I don't think we got to see autopilot, or at least navigate on autopilot in all its glory with all of its foibles. So I'm actually going to give the car a decent charge and then head back out onto some dual carriageway motorway type roads and see if I can introduce a few more of the issues, or at least give you an example of a few more of the issues that I've discovered. Yeah, we'll see what we can come up with.